Far be it from me to ever let you all forget that a group of 5 team is making the playoff. Tulane could very well be one of those teams. Thrilled to be joined by Corey Gloor, the radio voice of the Green Wave, fresh off a run to the NCAA Regionals in baseball. It's all eyes on football right now, Corey, with Jon Sumrall coming in from Troy. Let's start with the new head coach. You've been there the last several years. What are your impressions of the Green Wave's new head man?
Well, and thanks for having me back on here, Spencer. It's been a little bit, so I'm glad to be back on here talking Tulane with you. He's done an awesome job of, I think, maintaining the excitement for fans here of Tulane. There was a strong amount of sadness when Willie Fritz left for Houston with what he built here, but to get a guy like Jon Sumrall in, it really has kept the momentum going. He's really captured the fan base and kind of brought them under his wing. And so it really hasn't felt as though it's missed a beat with switching from Willie Fritz to Jon Sumrall. We'll see schematically how things are going to change here with what he brings over from Troy and everything like that. But in terms of just the excitement surrounding the program, that has continued to elevate even through this coaching change. I'm not sure, ball not even kicked off yet, that Tulane could have found a better replacement for Willie Fritz just with the types of jobs that Jon Sumrall was in the mix for when he was at Troy and what he did with Troy. And to get him here at Tulane, it shows that there is a real strong chance that Tulane's competing for that group of 5 playoff spot that you just mentioned, and that everyone here is behind doing that. It's been really fun to see him try and mold this program in this first 6 months that he's been here.
Yeah, and the talent acquisition is what I wonder about, because there are a couple of high-name, high-profile transfers that college football fans broadly are probably going to recognize. Mario Williams was a guy who was at USC. He was at Oklahoma before that. He's now down at Tulane. Ty Thompson was the highest-rated Oregon football quarterback recruit ever. More highly rated than Marcus Mariota, than Justin Herbert, than anybody. He's now down there, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But go outside of just those 2 guys who people might be familiar with. When you look at the rest of the rosters in the American Athletic Conference, which is certainly capable of putting a team into the playoff, the betting favorite, according to our friends at FanDuel, is Ryan Silverfield and the Memphis program, who I think can have an exceptional season. Tulane is right there, number 2. Where do you feel like this Green Wave roster stacks up compared to the rest of the league?
I think that's a fair spot to put him right now. I think what has Memphis probably as the early betting favorite is they return Seth Hennigan as their quarterback. And you talked about maybe the most talented returning quarterback, certainly in the league, but one of the more talented returners in the nation. That's what Hennigan is with Memphis. But in terms of where Tulane stacks up, regardless of what Memphis might be brewing there, they've got a pretty strong core returning from last year's club, primarily on the defensive side of the ball. They do lose a lot of their secondary, but up the middle and the defensive line, they have maintained a lot of that from what was a high-level defense in last year's club. Offensively, there are a lot of changes that are likely going to be happening here. New quarterback, new wide receivers, because a lot of those guys left, and you mentioned one of them that's going to come in and do some replacing there in Mario Williams. Offensive line stays pretty well intact, and you got your tight ends that pretty well stay intact here as well. And you got one of the best running backs in the nation in Mekhi Hughes that returns. But you still don't quite know who the signal caller is going to be. And until that question gets answered, that's the biggest thing right now for Tulane once they head into summer workouts right now. Camp in about 6 weeks is figuring out just what they have as QB1.
Let's talk about that quarterback battle before we get into the schedule side of things, which presents its own challenges. As they went through spring football, was there a leader? Is it Ty Thompson? Is it not Ty Thompson? How do you feel that quarterback battle is sitting as we sit here in the middle of June?
Right now, as I watched the spring practices, it really did feel like a 2-man race. Ty Thompson, brought in from Oregon, and Kai Horton, who has been the backup to Michael Pratt the last couple of years, has had to start some big profile games when Pratt was injured over the last couple of years. Most recently, it was the top 20 showdown with Ole Miss last year. He had to start that game, started a game at Southern Miss, had to lead some comebacks the year prior against Houston and whatnot. So he comes with the experience that Ty Thompson does not have in terms of leading a Division I offense and leading it to pretty strong effectiveness. So Thompson comes in with probably more skill set with what he's capable of doing and what he can bring to an offense. Kai Horton brings the experience of being able to already do something like that. And so those two really split reps during the course of spring. Did either really step in front of the other? It seemed like one day maybe it was Thompson, the other day it was Horton. And so it really does feel like a two-man battle. I know Coach Sumrall is high on a redshirt freshman here in Darian Mensah as well, and what he was doing in the spring. But I do think it's between Thompson and Horton, and what that looks like on August 29th when this season kicks off. I'm of the mindset, I've known Kai for a while. I know he'd be able to run an offense like this, and I think they're very comfortable if he's the guy. If you bring in a guy like Ty Thompson, if that's your choice in the portal like it was here for Jon Sumrall, you obviously see a lot of expectation about what he could bring to what you're trying to do. And so as I stand here talking to you right now, I would say that's probably the front runner in terms of being the starting quarterback. But I think if you ask anybody in those coaching offices here in New Orleans, they will tell you and say, honestly, it's between two guys, and they don't know as we sit here today.
It'll probably be the number one thing for Green Wave fans to look at throughout fall camp once that gets going in August. And then the schedule will get underway. And it's not exactly a cupcake first half for the Green Wave, Corey. You've got not just Kansas State at home week 2. You have Southeastern Louisiana week 1. That shouldn't be a problem. That game is on a Thursday, August 29th, same day that Colorado plays North Dakota State, which, for the Buffs, do that at your own peril. Kansas State, then at Oklahoma, followed by at Louisiana, and hosting South Florida, who might have some sneaky expectations in the American Conference this year after their big bowl win last season. I feel like if Tulane gets through that stretch at 3-2, they're doing well. They're doing fine. But if they find a way, you'd probably look at that Kansas State game as the more likely of the two to pull an upset because it is at home. If they do that, Corey, I think that's an early season message to not just every other group of 5 team pushing for the playoff, but any other team. Because Kansas State's a contender in the Big 12, one of the 2 or 3 favorites over there. I think that'd be a heck of a statement. And the other teams that'll push for the G5 spot, Liberty maybe. You've got Memphis, of course, in the American, Boise State. I'll never rule out Fresno State. If they win that week 2 game against Kansas State, boy, that would send a lot of shockwaves throughout the college football world.
Yeah, the first half of this calendar for Tulane is going to be a rough one, and how they manage to get out of this. The second half on paper looks pretty kind, and so if they can come out of the first half of the season with a winning mark, and you mentioned the Kansas State, Oklahoma back-to-back, getting one of those games would be massive for this team. I'll add on, I'm glad you mentioned South Florida there as the conference opener. That's another team that I think has a legitimate shot to make a push in this league this year. UAB the week after that, right before an off week as well. UAB with Trent Dilfer in his second year. They've got a lot of returners. That could be a tricky trip as well right after the South Florida game. And so those first 6 weeks to me are going to tell the tale of this season, because after that, the opponents get a little bit kinder on paper. But if you can get a win over Kansas State at home, if you can certainly spring an upset in Oklahoma in week 3. That Louisiana trip is going to be a little gnarly here as well. That's a very good program out in Lafayette. And so the first half of this schedule is going to put Jon Sumrall right in the fire here. I'm sure they're okay with the fact that they have Southeastern Louisiana to open the year, try and get some things figured out in that first week. Ideally, if you can take care of business there before you really begin those next 4 or 5 weeks, that will really tell the tale of what your season's going to be.
And then you could set up, if things go according to plan, a regular season finale showdown with potentially an American Conference Championship game berth on the line. Playoff implications could very well be on the line against Memphis, having them at home on November 28th. That's a rather large game on paper, but a lot for the Green Wave to get through before that. And of course, they've got to figure out what the quarterback situation will be. Corey Gloor, the radio voice of the Green Wave. Corey, we appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you, Spencer. Roll Wave.
Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier, which is better than harder, of course. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down, which is better than up, the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals. So just ask yourself this question. What are you waiting for? I don't know either. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.